There we go. We're back with Misericorde, Volume 1. We'll let the theme song play out. I got you, Dime. I'll answer in just a second. Misericorde, Volume 1. Now, Dime had a quick question as that was playing. Quick question about how you play VNs, actually. Do you do one playthrough only, a starter play, and then a perfect play? Exhaust the options as much as you can? Does it vary? This is the second visual novel that we've played on the channel, the first of which being The House in Fata Morgana. Both of them, barring some very, very minor flavor text sort of moments in The House in Fata Morgana, and maybe still to come here, I don't know. Both of them are choice-free. These are what are described as kinetic novels, where they have no direct input from the player as far as routing is concerned. So it has not come up. In the future, I think it'll feel very case by case. With something like, I don't know, off the top of my head, like Tsukihime, right? That has multiple routes that are each individually 20 hours apiece. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that until we're playing it. I might... It would come down to context of creator's intent. Was the intent of the game something where they wanted the player to go back and redo it each time until they unraveled the truth? Or is it more on like a dating sim side of things where the character that you end up with and follow that path down is like, that's what you picked, you know? It's going to depend. We've had games in the past where we elected to explore more than one ending or path. Yeah, it really just comes down to the vibes of both the moment as well as like interviews and such. There's no one size fits all. But it's a good question. It is a really good question because some VNs get very long and very intricate and very dense of this kind of web of choices. Right. Some of them have situations where all of the routes are basically you're getting to an end, which is flipping a switch on the back end of the game. And once you flip all the switches of the wrong endings, the bad endings, then you are kind of opened up to a true path to flow through, right? That would be something where I would want to see it to its true path conclusion. I like, Nancy, I like your suggestion where credits could unlock another run where we would roll for something else and then keep it on the list as something to go back to as like Y. If we did X route, then do Y route as like a sequel, perhaps. There are options. There are always going to be options. It's never one size fits all. Very, very, very good question, though. We're back with Misericorde tonight, and had a really good stream last week with Misericorde. Our player character, Sister Hedwig, had her first day of work as the chronicler, and had like a run-in with Eustace, who is the, I guess for, maybe it is just directly archivist. I forget what her role is defined as in the game, but just for the sake of explanation, the archivist for the Abbey. And she was kind of standoffish, kind of, a little aggro about the nature of things and the nature of change. But gave us this harsh warning to not investigate the library or the records archives without her there. My system is very particular, she said. Do not search back here without me. For those that have not been here for the full playthrough, I highly suggest going back and watching through the first 6 episodes now. Split into nice 1-hour increments for your viewing pleasure on Twitch as well as YouTube. Unfortunately, going forward, I will not be able to clip these into highlights until I get the highlights situation underway and organized on Twitch's end. Which is kind of, it's kind of rough. It kind of really stinks very specifically for this that I can't highlight these VODs and post them even if I wanted to, because they've made these changes. So it's a little rough. It's a little sad that this won't immediately get to go to YouTube. But the full VOD, the unclipped VOD, will be live here on the channel for you to go back to and look from. And then in the future, once everything gets squared away on my end with the highlights, things should go back to the regular churn. Yes, so the main crux, this is the last time I'll explain it, because as we get further into this, I feel like the people that are in, and the people that are out are out. Misericorde is a story of a late 15th century abbey, Linbarrow Abbey in 1482 in North England. It is a fairly isolated abbey of nuns, and among them is an anchoress who is someone who has completely dedicated their life to scripture, the word of the Lord, the written word of the Lord. I don't know if I said lore or Lord, whatever. She cannot leave this cell, effectively. She is there for kind of referencing scripture to people who come in and seek her guidance. She's there to rewrite scripture so that it can be copywritten for future generations. Just completely dedicated to the written word and completely dedicated to biblical study. And has been in this room for decades. We kind of got the understanding that she's probably in her late 20s. Given the context of the game. And so at least a decade has been in this cell. One day, the Mother Superior of the Abbey, who everybody, lovingly refers to as Soup, opens up the cell door, which is a shock to Sister Hedwig, and says, you have to leave. And she goes, what are you talking about? I don't have to leave. I can't leave. This is my life. I've dedicated to this. And she said, no, one of the sisters has been murdered, And you are the only person that I can be sure did not do it, because you physically could not do it. You have been in this room. The only lock is on the outside. I need you not only to fill the slain sister's role of chronicler, but more importantly, I need you to investigate. Keep an eye on these girls. Keep an eye on the people who are coming in and out. We have a farmhand who is locked up right now, awaiting the bishop to arrive, but it doesn't really feel right. It doesn't really feel like this boy did it, and so I just want to be abundantly sure before the bishop arrives and things are set in stone and final and irrevocable. I just want to make sure we're doing the right thing, and I can't trust anybody but you. And so we have been thrown into this abbey, which has probably, how many would you say? 9 individual sisters? There's Eustace and Darcy, there's Angela, there's Charity, and there's Adela, and there's the other Catherine, and there's now I'm blanking on the rest of the names. Flora. There's not Angelica. Who's Catherine's friend? There's Moira. Who's Catherine's friend? The one that showed the secrets behind the walls. I can't remember her name right now. I'm blanking on her name, and I'm blanking on the oldest sister. Those 2 names I'm blanking on. Let me see if it's in the snapshots. No, Adela. Let's see. Agatha? Is it Agatha? It might be Agatha. I don't know. We'll find out in a couple of seconds. It's fun to do this thought exercise. Count them in the pew shot. Oh, I could do that. Hang on. Darcy, Eustace, Catherine, Charity. It's just the 2 that I'm blanking on. It's just those 2. Angela, Flora, Adela. We'll find it out. Last stream, we went and we spoke to the farmhand, and pretty assured that boy did not do it. The one damning piece of evidence was a blood-soaked tunic, and he was like, "What? I didn't even wear my tunic. What are you talking about?" He said Catherine II would know. That was the last thing he said before we left. He was very nervous to let us know that Catherine II would have an idea. And so that's something that we could do. And then we explored outside, and we found one piece of torn fabric on a tree, if you remember that. And then the sister, whose name I can't remember, took us between the walls and showed us an insane, demonic, pentagram-looking situation carved into stone on a wall. And she was like, "I don't know why this shit's here, but it's really scary to me. And if you're telling the truth and you're not lying about seeing that man in armor with the black goat, this might have something to do with it." And then the stream ended, I think not too long after that. We had a really, really, really nice moment with Charity, where she told off Angela to her face. It was great. It was really, really great. So let's get back to things here. Sunday, February 16th, that was last week. It's now Sunday, February 23rd. Gonna keep going here with more Misericorde Volume 1. Supper tasted like ash. Why did I feel so wretched, given that Charity had been completely correct? Angela had treated me horribly in my brief time within her reach. There was no denying it. From the way everybody else spoke of her, it sounded like I was not the sole target of her ire either. I deserved it. The suffering Angela seemed intent on inflicting upon me felt like appropriate punishment for all of my little sins. In fact, if that had been all I had to endure, I might say that I had gotten off lightly. An anchorite, or anchoress, does not break their vow. It just never happens. As I spooned my meal into my mouth, I thought about these words. These Latin words. I will even appoint over you terror, consumption, and the burning ague that shall consume the eyes and cause sorrow of heart. I was positively awash in sorrow. I was terrified, beyond reckoning, and I was racked with a mysterious illness, one that did not seem to be life-threatening, but enhanced my sorrows and fears thrice over. Oh yeah, she doubled over and threw up more black bile when she came in from the walkabout outside. I was being punished. For the next few days, I completed my tasks in silence and wandered the halls in a daze. I accepted my due. At night, the halls echoed with that familiar incessant scratching. I would stand at the end of my old hallway, torn between returning to the comfort of my cell and fear of the demonic symbol in the walls behind it. I must apologize. I don't remember anything worth noting for a little while after that. Wow, you were really close to a really nice break in the stream. If only I knew there were 20 more lines, we would have had a much, much cleaner break. But that's how it goes. It's a first playthrough. Excuse me. I'm very sorry. My stupor lasted for several days. The superior eventually pulled me into her office and gently asked if I've made any progress. I hadn't, of course, which meant the rest of the conversation was decidedly less gentle. Hedwig, I'm sure that I don't need to impress the importance of your tasks upon you again. No, not at all. It's just, the path forward seems exceedingly simple to me. You haven't even breached the topic with Catherine the First. How exactly do I do that without giving the entire thing away? I would have expected that by now you would have at least been able to ingratiate yourself with the sisters. Can you really think of no way to elegantly approach the subject? Not that easy. Of course it won't be easy. Speaking of the dead never is. But surely you can come up with a way to be elegant about it. I think you're vastly overestimating my social abilities. I mean, it's hardly been a week. I don't mean to be too brutish. But you haven't been drawn and quartered by any conspirators yet, have you? You're not suspected of any ulterior motives, I'm certain of it. All the more reason that starting to press now feels so difficult. The superior sighed deeply. Let's walk through things together. James told you that Catherine could vouch for him regarding his traveling cloak. I imagine there's a way to confirm this without revealing too much. How? I suppose you could ask about Catherine the First, generally. Respectfully, of course. And then you could, well, I don't know, mention you heard something about the cloaked villain arriving that morning? It's better than nothing. It sounds like you've thought about this. Maybe you should ask her. You're her superior, after all. I am your superior as well. Of course, and I didn't mean... And I could not ask her for that precise reason. I'm in charge of this place, and therefore, everyone has their guard up around me. That doesn't make any sense. It's the way of the world. Being in charge is often more work than being charged. It is exhausting. But they'll trust me? I don't think anyone here would confide in me so readily. It's more likely they would speak to you openly, yes? Or at the very least, they may be less inclined to choose every word so carefully. I just don't know. Hedwig, you met James. You saw his suffering. I did. And perhaps they have not shown it, but the sisters are suffering as well. Bringing the truth to light will help to heal everyone. It will fix everything. Well, not the accused. I just want the truth. If the sisters are keeping secrets, it could very, very well be that they are hiding the truth out of fear rather than malice. The cloud must be lifted, for everyone's sake, and for Catherine II's. I wish people would stop calling her that. It just doesn't feel right. Catherine II? Well, I assure you I mean it with the utmost affection. She took to it wholeheartedly. Her and Catherine I, they played some sort of game for it. It was a series of chess games, if I recall. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised at this point. It is an exceedingly popular game. It's not just for children, if that's your apprehension. I wouldn't say I have any apprehension. I mostly just find myself frustrated by its use as this sort of language all its own. I think I was expecting that years and years of reading scripture would have been enough to prepare me for speaking in an abbey. Interesting. You know, I actually find it surprising that none of the books you had in your cell mentioned chess. It feels very old to me, and there's so much written about it. As you've pointed out, it does weave through every conversation. I've known about it my whole life. It's very frustrating, and it's more than just chess. I don't feel like I'm relating to these women at all. What if I taught you? What? Chess. Would you like to learn how to play? I wouldn't want to impose. Oh, don't be silly. It's a game. It's not an imposition in the slightest. Besides, if it'll help you build your confidence up somewhat. The superior got up from her seat and walked over to a shelf in the corner, retrieving a large wooden box. She heaved it onto her desk and opened the clasps, revealing an impressively polished chessboard. She carefully laid this board on the desk and beckoned me to bring my chair closer. She began removing beautifully carved pieces from the box and placing them on the board. Some were brilliantly white, others were tinted with a red hue. Ivory! Aren't they lovely? They're incredible. Now, these common ones, that's right, the smaller ones, those are the pawns. They get lined up in the front like this. They look a bit like thimbles. They do, don't they? Line them up in a row here. What does the one on the horse do? Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We need to acquaint you with the most important pieces first. This one here is the king. I'll spare you the details of my first game. Needless to say, I did quite terribly, although not for a lack of trying. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. It was interesting, though. It made me realize that I couldn't remember playing any games with anyone else before. I had these little rituals that I performed in my cell that I supposed you might consider games. I'd commit the words I was studying closely through Lectio Divina, and then see if I could make those passages and phrases again with the words I wrote while transcribing new Bibles. What? Does that not count as a game? I'll agree that it is different, but you can play a game by yourself. It's just harder to consider that competition. The spirit of the whole endeavor is something different entirely. I sound like Sister Adela, don't I? At the very least, playing chess with the superior was enlightening. I finally grasped why playing so-and-so moves ahead was such a helpful phrase. Unfortunately for me, I could barely think through the move I was making, let alone what it'd do in the future. I believe that is checkmate. so it's over. Don't be discouraged. It was your first game, after all. You did admirably, considering. Well, thank you. I'm more than happy to play with you more in the future if you'd like. But promise me, you will ask Catherine about James's cloak, one way or another. You made a promise to him, after all. And I think both of us have an unspoken promise to keep for Catherine II's sake. Don't you? I'll make sure to speak with Sister Catherine. Good girl. I'll summon you again in a few days' time. She'd been gesturing to me with my defeated king piece throughout this exchange. With a flick of the wrist, she placed it back in the sturdy box along with the other pieces. I stood up to leave and bowed my head. Thank you, Your Reverence. Now, we spoke of this. Yes, of course. Until next time, Superior. She nodded and returned to tidying up the chessboard. I left the room. Hey! Early 2000s sci-fi skateboarding game. Whoa! You hear that low end? Headphone check for real. Slowly turns to look towards the fourth wall of the kinetic VN. Right, exactly. Does that not count as a game? It was mid-afternoon. I remember the sky looking cloudier than ever, as if the fog I had seen surrounding Linbarrow Tor had encroached around the abbey itself. What a strange place this is, I'd promised the Superior I would speak to Catherine, but I admit that I was reluctant to run straight to her all the same. If she came to me, well, she came to me. After all, I would need to bring the topic up naturally. It was no use chasing her down. I decided to clear my head with a stroll through the gardens. My stupor had not cleared completely, but I at least had the energy and the desire to be amongst the flowers. It was a reassuring feeling. It had been a few days since I had felt the capacity to want. Even with gray skies above, the garden was a jewel. The flowers were fewer than I imagined they might be in the spring, but nonetheless, the bushes and hedges and herbs were a welcome and inviting sight. I heard rustling up ahead. To my delight, a black cat eventually emerged from the bushes. It looked at me briefly with its big, moony eyes, and for a moment, I forgot all of my troubles. This is the actual game soundtrack. Yep. I stepped forward to coo at it. What's up, Fenris? How are you? It looked at me inquisitively. But a sudden sound from the bushes startled the poor thing. It scampered away, leaving me somewhat disappointed. Aww. A figure emerged through the bushes next to me. Sister Angela? Did you see it? The cat? No, the cow. She looked entirely ridiculous. There were twigs sticking out of her hood from her attempt to squeeze through the bushes, and she was breathing heavily. I suppose she must have been chasing that cat for quite some time. Of course I meant the cat. Oh, yes. Which way did it go? It sort of scurried off that way. I gestured towards the edge of the path. I was trying not to giggle at Angela's misfortune, especially given that thinking about the animosity between us had put me in a daze for half a week. I see. She glanced in the direction I had indicated, then sighed and stood up straight. If you find another opportunity, do try to seize it. Cats have no business here in the Abbey. Well, why not? Does it matter? I know you're not used to being outside your cell, but I would have thought obedience would not be so foreign a concept. I am the prioress, and that should be reason enough. Why do you hate me so much? Angela was busy removing debris from her hood and cowl, but I could see her arch her eyebrow even higher than I was used to. I don't hate you. Well, it certainly seems like you do. I should have perhaps saved this confrontational energy for questioning Catherine, but seeing Angela so out of sorts had, well, I must admit, urged me to act on the feelings that had been brewing inside me for the last couple days. And that's funny. You know, I could ask you the same question. I seem to recall that I walked in on you being incredibly childish in your estimation of me.
That was Charity. She
Egged you on? Don't be pathetic. Own your words.
You have been very cruel to me since we first met.
When you ran straight into me?
It was a mistake.
Yeah, one you've made no effort to correct, it seems. And I seem to recall that you barreled into me later that same day. I don't hate you, Sister Hedwig. I simply find you tiresome. I am exhausted by what you represent.
I wish you would believe me when I say I'm not after your job. I have no interest in running the Abbey, or any Abbey for that matter.
Even if I did believe you, which I'm not saying I do, that wouldn't comfort me much at all. Succession seems to be the Superior's plan for you, even if she hasn't told you.
I'm the new chronicler, and that's all.
Yet you seem to leave your job quite early each day.
Well, I'm just not a terribly prolific writer. Not yet, at least.
This was one of the first times Angela hadn't had a retort ready to fire back at me. And I was so surprised it almost knocked me off balance as much as a piercing reply would have.
Anyway, for my part, I don't hate you. I'm afraid of you, I think.
That's good. That means you've not yet abandoned all respect for authority.
How perfectly cruel for you to say. This is exactly what I mean when I ask, why do you hate me?
And once again, I must say, I do not hate you. I hate your disregard for the natural order of things. I hate that once again, I have been saddled with unruly children to rear as my own because the Superior has no interest in doing it herself.
I'm not a child.
You are a babe, not 2 weeks out of the womb. You weren't alive in that cell, and choosing to break that seal, well, that's a grave sin all its own. And by my estimation, you need my help more than anyone here.
Well, then help me. I don't revel in my sins. I'm not proud of them. What help can you offer me beyond venom?
Do you know what this place is, Hedwig? Linbarrow Tor is not a normal monastery. Surely you've noticed, even with your complete lack of worldly experience?
Of course, but
this is the last stop before the gates of hell. Do you think all the sisters here ended up in this ruin of their own volition? Do you think there are an abundance of women in the world eager to take the veil and serve the Lord here? Make no mistake, you should be begging for my approval. You've emerged into a den of vipers, not a house of God. You shouldn't trust a word any of the sisters tell you. You should be wary of their intentions. Why, their behavior in the wake of the murder of one of their own should be evidence enough. I don't hate you, Sister Hedwig. I'm simply the only person here who cares enough not to lie to you. I have high expectations for your behavior. That is all. And you, at the very least, have the potential to serve God with humility and grace here on this hill. Not like the other lost women here. The criminals and the freaks. Christ spoke highly of the prostitutes and the tax collectors only on the condition that they sinned no more. The sisters here, they believe that they are owed salvation.
Well, if that is true, Sister Angela, why, spit it out, why are you here?
Why indeed?
And with that, she brushed the last twig out of her habit, peered down her nose at me one last time, and laughed. How perfectly bewildering that woman was to me. And forgive me for being so cross, but to this day, I find her treatment of me so beguiling. I had spent days wondering, did I deserve this? Was Angela a conduit through which God could punish me for the sins that Angela rightfully pointed out to me? And I mean, I still wonder that. In my calmer moments, I acquiesce to the idea. In my lowest moments, I almost relish it. But the truth of the matter is, every time I was presented with her maddening ability to pinprick me, to always find something wrong with me. Oh my, I'm doing it right now, aren't I? Ignore me. All is right with the world. I'm back here, in my cell, where I belong. I deserve every bit of ire I'm recounting to you. It's just that in retelling the story, well, I must inhabit a previous version of myself to properly describe how I felt. I'll try my best not to let the past and the present bleed together too much into the future. Angela huffed away after that cat. I decided I'd better head the opposite direction if I was to avoid any more unpleasantness. I walked back toward the rectory, the last of my mind's haze replaced with a burning indignance. I would not say I was in a good mood, but I was certainly more alert than I had been for some time.
Margaret, not Angelica, Margaret is her name. Did you screenshot the typo? Be honest. Be honest. I was trying to. And you missed it. I saw it too. I just glossed right over it. Oh, there she is. Splendid.
Oh, hello, Sister Margaret. Hello, Sister Catherine.
We were looking for you. What luck. I told her to look for you, and I wanted to make sure she did. Margaret has this very amusing idea that I'm some sort of flake. Can you believe it? Anyway, we'd like to cordially invite you to the Misericorde this evening. That's right. You've seemed all out of sorts recently, and, well, a little birdie told me that Charity may have indicated that you were welcome. Which you are, as it happens. But you've been in such a state recently, well, Margaret got it into her head that you perhaps were waiting for a more direct invitation. Which I actually suggested Catherine extend several days before you even spoke with Charity about it, I should add. Which I don't even remember, but I would never accuse Margaret of lying. Hence, would you like to join us in the Misericorde tonight?
Well, I'm very grateful for the invitation. I hope you don't think I was moping around because of that. Although,
hey, wonderful. Listen, I knew it couldn't have been my fault. Catherine, Margaret, let her speak. Of course.
Did Charity explain what happened after our conversation?
There was nothing else mentioned.
Oh, well, I looked over my shoulder and peered past the pair of sisters in front of me, just in case Angela was preparing to make another dramatic entrance.
I actually really like that response, Evil Oatmeal. That's good. The typos tell the story of how this immaculate piece of literature was made by countless hours of labor. That's true. It's just one person. They made all the music, they wrote all the words, they edited all the pictures, they drew all the drawings. That's just what it is. I just don't want it to be taken as, you know, the world is in such a weird state, especially in the gaming industry with like lazy dev this and whatever that. And I don't like that spirit at all. I think I make that pretty abundantly clear too. Nothing's ever perfect. It just drives me crazy. It drives me crazy when people are like, wow, couldn't even bother to fix a typo, or even just, I saw Vertigo today in theaters. Absolutely adored it. One of my favorite movies I've ever seen in my life. I had never seen it before. Got to see it in theaters. Incredible. Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo. And there was a girl next to me who had to have been maybe 5-6 years younger than I was. And she was just going like, every time a character would do something or a move was made that was like, this was made in the 1950s. And it wasn't even in like, because the movie's funny. In multiple places, the movie is funny. But this was this person like thinking that they had a leg up on the movie in a very like, man, things were so dumb then. And if you've never seen the movie before, I won't get into details about it. But it was funny to see the ways that her laughter was spun around on her and really became like egg on her face by the time the film was over. And about 70% of the way through the movie, I turned over and I went, please stop laughing. And she did, for what it's worth. She did. And I think she was on a date. And I think the guy next to her that took her on the date was excited to take her on the date. And their like brief conversation as they got up and walked away, you could tell he just kind of like dismissed it as like whatever. But I think he was a little undercut by her reaction. I think he was probably more excited. And I tell this story just because like little gaffes and things and little moments, and even like obviously in this case it was a lot of very actors acting storytelling, you know, in the way that like 40s and 50s movies are. Like the way that like a detective like goes up against the wall with his hat down and kind of does a very like silly, you know, it's very acted, it's very staged, it's very theatrical. It just, I don't know, it gets under my skin. And all that to say, I try not to make too much of a note about those things, just because you never know what people's intentions are when they call shit out like that. And I know you well enough. That's why I just very lightly was like, were you trying to get that typo? You missed it, by the way. But anyway, that's... Cap owns the Zoomers, not clickbait. Alfred Hitchcock looked 70 years into the future and owned the Zoomers. Just wait till she sees the end of this movie. Her reaction is priceless. I looked over my shoulder and peered past the pair of sisters in front of me, just in case Angela was preparing to make another dramatic entrance. Sister Angela may have overheard the two of us speaking unfavorably about her. Is that all? No wonder she didn't say anything about it. Arguments with Angela? They happen all the time. It's practically passé to mention. No, you don't understand.
She was extremely upset. It was horrible. You never forget your first. First time she caught me in the pantry at night, she dragged me by my ear to the superior's office to wake her up to demand that I be punished. And were you? Of course not. Soup mumbled something about sleep being important and shut the door. Honestly, I think it was meant more for Angela than me. Angela has it in her head that I am responsible for that cat running around the Abbey. And she will not stop bothering me about my broken door. Well, it is a bit creaky. I'm a busy woman, all right? Besides, I can't work with my hands. So I shouldn't be worried about Angela? No, not in the slightest. I considered expanding my story to include the encounter with Angela that I had just left, but I decided not to pursue that subject further. I was relieved to hear that I had some support in the matter. However, I didn't want to risk it by continuing to invoke Angela's name, lest she emerge from behind a corner or drop from the ceiling at that very moment. What does one actually do in the Misericorde? Drink. Yeah, there's lots of wine. Is that all? Wine, as I'm sure you're aware, is a staple of life in monasteries. So this on its own was not exactly enticing. After all, there was practically an ocean of the stuff just below us. Better wine than we drink usually, to be clear. Wine that's made for the drinking, not just for drinking. Oh, I see. There's also chess, and there's music, and if I'm feeling like breaking out the lute, anyway. We read and we talk. It's an oasis of pleasure here in our boring little community. Angela will not be attending tonight, by the way. Well then, I'd be delighted to join you. Splendid. I'm very sorry if you were feeling left out. I assure you I wasn't, but thank you all the same. You really do worry too much, Margaret. Well then, I'll see you later. The two excused themselves. Are you surprised that I agreed to attend what sounds plainly like a night of debauchery, gossip, and sin? Well, I suppose I surprised myself too. Although, as I'm sure you've guessed, I had an ulterior motive. A wine-soaked event would be the perfect opportunity to ask Catherine about poor James. Tongues would be looser than usual, and my questioning might not be under quite such scrutiny. I explained all of this to the superior, who pulled me aside after supper to ask if I had fulfilled my promise.
Whoa. Whoa! Hold on. This one's good.
The Misericorde? Yes. It seems like the best way for me to talk to Catherine about it. It'll seem natural. And it didn't feel natural at any other point that you saw her today? When she was giving you this invitation, perhaps? Well, Margaret was with her. I see. Well, I don't love the prospect, but as long as you get the result we need, I can't stop you. Is there something wrong with the Misericorde? It's a space with explicitly relaxed rules. To be honest, I'm surprised you aren't more vocally opposed. Well, it is a rule unto itself, is it not? I can't argue with tradition. I see. You're a stickler, but not a spoil sport? It's something like that. I can understand that, I suppose. Polycubic, yeah, hang on. This is a perfect time for me to say,
take a look at the Misericorde companion. Down here, I should have the soundtrack up on Bandcamp. Full soundtrack on Bandcamp. 104 songs. Yeah, it is. It's right here. Curious about this game? Check out our Misericorde companion. The problem is, given that most rules around here are quite lax, the bar is raised a bit higher in there. I think Angela certainly cares about the rules. Well, she is the prioress after all, so that's her job. Although she might go a little too far in the other direction for my taste. What is your ideal picture for this place, then? I'd be curious to know. It's a very interesting question. Thank you for asking. The superior swirled the cup she held in her hand and looked off into the middle distance behind me. It would be much the same, truthfully. I'm the same way, Polycubic. I haven't listened to anything besides what you see here myself. The buildings wouldn't be in such disrepair. I wouldn't have to suffer such direct insubordination on a regular basis, but I certainly wouldn't rule by the sword. That is the trouble with the Misericorde as it exists now. I have no quarrel with the concept of an easement of the dam, but I'm not sure there is much of a dam currently. What do you mean? Children should be expected to have secrets. Towns need inns. That's so true. The workers in the fields, the lowliest peasants, deserve their holidays. Precepts must be upheld, but I think they can only be upheld if people are allowed at least the illusion of breaking them. That is surprising, to say the least. You disagree, then? Understandable. Well, for one, are we not nuns? Forgoing the earthly delights is our strength and purpose, surely. It would seem we have reversed positions here. Flipped the chessboard around the other way, as it were. Well, in my ideal abbey, everyone is content. They do their tasks and enrich their lives and serve as vessels of prayer. And then they are allowed a brief respite so that they do not become overwhelmed or discouraged by their own work. I spent my whole life alone in a cell with my work, and not once did I complain. The superior tilted her head in a manner that reminded me of the cat I'd seen Angela chasing earlier that day. Did you never dream of leaving? Was there nothing in your books that you wished you could see for yourself? Never. The writing was enough for me. You must have a truly vivid imagination. I'm not sure I do. I never needed anything else. You never sang to yourself? You never invented little games? Well, I did have a few reading games, now that you mention it, but perhaps that's how we arrive at an understanding then. You were perfectly content in the world as you experienced it, but you still needed to come up with something of your very own, something different. That is the ideal purpose of the Misericorde. The tavern, the arena, and so on. I find that very hard to swallow. Would you say the same of prostitution? The superior made a sneering gesture that took me aback. You're flailing your way out of check here, I'm afraid. There's no need to grasp at such extreme examples. Of course I don't feel that way about whoring. And don't retort by asking if I find whores beyond redemption then, by the way. I wasn't. That wouldn't make any sense. Well, you're quite right. She finished her drink in silent satisfaction. I steamed for a minute. I'm afraid that she was actually entirely correct in her assumption that pivoting the conversation back to scriptural understanding was my intended reply. I find the Misericorde in its current state
unseemly. The rules here aren't being followed outside of it, let alone inside of it, and I worry about what the sisters could be up to in there. It ceases to be an easement if the whole plane is flooded. Well, I'll be careful. I'm sure one night with the others won't utterly corrupt me. See that it doesn't. I suppose it can't hurt for you to experience it for yourself and report back to me exactly how founded my assumptions are. If you're that worried about it, why not just disallow it? It's an expected function of a Benedictine monastery. Besides, I have no interest in making these women respect me even less. Would they respect you less if you took it away? Or would they respect you more? You know, if you showed that you had that power, I dare say I'd be the next one found without a head. I shuddered. While I was never completely free from fear, direct confrontation with the reality of my situation still unmoored me. It made me feel like I was being watched. Please don't say such things. I'm simply making a point. As I have said before, I must play a very cautious strategy in my position. Speaking of, would you like to play a game? The change of subject was a relief, I must admit. We whittled away some time playing chess. I wasn't very good at it yet, I must confess, but nonetheless I appreciated the opportunity to fill my mind with something beyond visions of blood and guts.
I'm stoked for the Misericorde, dude.
Hedwig will be joining us tonight.
Oh, really?
Lucky her. We had just left the rectory after the evening meal. There was, apparently, still some time before the Misericorde's door would open. I had a little bit of time to while away preparing myself for a night in the lion's den. Don't make such a fuss about it. Why not? We're just happy to have you. Well, I am happy to hear it, but nonetheless, you're making me nervous. You'll have so much fun. It's such a special occasion, honestly. Special? Well, yes. Isn't this going to be your first time ever going to a social event? Careful. Don't break her. Sorry. Felt like I was about to faint. Moira was completely correct, of course. Never in my life had I been to anything more sociable than meals in the rectory, and those had been overwhelming enough on their own. I'm going to do my best to have a good time. It's all that matters. It'll be fun. What are we going to do anyway? I suppose we don't do anything really specific. It's very fluid. We got a chessboard. I think Catherine mentioned that there's music sometimes. I'll bring my lute. You have your own lute? Yeah. Catherine II gave it to me ages ago. One day I should ask Catherine if she could nick the portative for an evening rather than just disabling it. That could be fun to mess around with. I wish you wouldn't fiddle with the superior's things. Oh, it's all in good fun. Soup knows. I'm not so sure. Hedwig, you're getting too nervous again. Moira had seemed so carefree ever since that day she broke down while talking to me in the dormitories. I was jealous of her ability to have that be her one emotional outburst on such a horrible subject. It's as if she'd simply been able to drain the abscess and heal the wound. I wished that I could do the same. Unfortunately, every one of my fears and miseries seemed to linger and fester within each other. If my head was a diseased limb, I'd simply have to lop it off. The sun was just starting to set. I decided to go for a walk in the garden. It was one of the best places for me to clear my head that didn't involve drawing a bath, provided I didn't run into Angela at least. But what were the odds of that happening again? I was determined to make real, tangible progress tonight. The superior was right to be frustrated with the lack of momentum. That poor young man had begged me to do something to secure his freedom, and then I slipped into a dark spell for days. I had been selfish. It wasn't going to be impossible. Things weren't so bad. I even had a clue to follow up on. It'd be easy to ask Catherine about the cloak when we both had a few cups of wine. There was nothing to worry about. I was genuinely interested, after all. What would I tell Catherine if she asked how I knew about the cloak?
Hedwig,
Oh, hello?
I want to show you something. You gotta come see.
Oh, very well. Darcy scurried off around the bend and toward the cloister before I could finish my reply. I had to hike up my robe to keep up with her without tripping on the stairs.
Oh, it's great Darcy lore that she's very fast.
For how slow she speaks. She was leading me to the dorms, it seemed. Whatever it was she had to show me, I could not guess.
I'm sorry about the mess. I lost an important mushroom, and I've been turning the place upside down looking for it.
She'd ushered me into her room in the dormitory. It was a stark contrast from my own. There were bits and bobs everywhere. Haphazardly stacked books, bottles of various sizes, both empty and full, little scraps of paper, plants in little pots. Darcy had certainly made the space hers.
I've been working on this for a while, and I think you might be interested.
She was standing in front of a small cauldron that was full of a thin, clear liquid that smelled a bit like wet grass.
You've been sick and sad a lot lately, and I thought, well, maybe I could do something about that.
Do something? Did you make this for me?
It's a little something that I'm fiddling with. It'll make you feel better, maybe.
What's in it? I didn't want to sound rude, but I couldn't help but think about what might happen to me if I drank something Darcy had brewed.
Well, it has some St. John's wort, it's got some sage, and some water from up in the hills, and I boiled it all together with some other things as well, I forget. It's got mint for flavor, though.
Mentha?
That's right.
She ladled some of the liquid into a little bottle. The whole setup was a little precarious. I lunged forward to stop the wobbling cauldron from plummeting to the floor as Darcy knocked it about with her sleeve.
Whoa, steady on me.
Good thing I was here.
Anyway, try some.
Darcy, is this quite all right for me?
What do you mean?
I have a frail constitution, and
this is very, 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 very light. Don't worry.
You think I could drink this without any trouble?
If I did it right, it'll in fact lessen all your troubles.
It's very kind of you. And I hope I'm not being rude. I just, the Bible often reminds us to remain sober-minded.
You're not sober-minded. You're sad a lot, and you're lonely as well. I was very worried while you weren't talking very much, and I'm not very good at talking, so I didn't want to butt in while you were saying precious few things. But it still made me sad to see that, so I wonder what I could do to help. And this will help you to remain sober-minded. The world's strange, and there is much to be sad about. Even here, of course. But there's no better way to face the sadness than to be prepared. And that's all this is.
She held the little vessel out to me. Well? I took it from her and gingerly took a sip. It was surprisingly thick, although it didn't taste as bad as I had imagined. Maybe the mentha helped after all. Darcy beamed at me and took the bottle back from me, filling it up and closing it with a stopper before passing it back to me.
Some more for later if you fancy.
I don't feel any different.
It'll take a little bit, but I'm sure it'll relax you before tonight.
Oh, that would be nice. Will you be joining us in the Misericorde as well?
Not tonight. I'll be busy with other things.
The odds were increasing that I would have to deal with Angela in the social setting that night. The idea was not relaxing in the slightest, and actively worked against whatever Darcy's potion might have been doing for me at that very moment.
You'll have fun. You'll feel like a real member of the Abbey after tonight, I reckon.
This isn't gonna be some sort of hazing, is it?
Goodness, no. That was the pranks.
Right.
I got you good.
True enough, true enough. She smiled at me once more and then ushered me out of her dorm.
I don't mean to rush you, but I have some work to do.
Oh, no, not at all. Thank you for the tincture.
I hope it serves you well.
I gave a little nod of thanks and hurried out of the room. There was yet some time to while away before it would be appropriate to head to the Misericorde. I decided I would hole up in my dorm and calm myself with some reading. A splendid idea until I realized that I currently had no books in the room, save for one. I really should have asked the superior to move my collection out of the cell and into my dormitory. Medea simply wouldn't do for now. I felt a little apologetic. Of course, I still appreciated the gift that Catherine had given me by transcribing the play for me, but I wasn't sure that it was something that would help me feel any less tense at this moment. I needed something like Ecclesiastes, not a story about a pagan woman murdering her children. I laid down on the bed and held the little bottle Darcy had given me up in the air. I rotated it in my fingers and stared at it. There were no words for it, but I was still trying to read it, I think. If that makes any sense at all. I could feel a cool glass getting warmer between my fingertips. If I ran my thumb over the cork, I could sense just how much rougher the cork was than the bottle. The longer I did it, the easier it would be to notice the sounds that the bottle made as well. The gentle sloshing of the liquid inside, and the way the stopper brushed against my skin. It absorbed me utterly. I wondered if, perhaps, Darcy's concoction was working after all. After several minutes, I was so engrossed in the patterns of light dancing through the dark green bottle that I scarcely had room in my mind to think about anything else. Do you ever do that? Feel an object every which way until it feels like everything? I don't have any more of that tincture in me, but I still try, from time to time. Lectio Divina, the sacred act of rereading and repeating a single line of scripture over and over until it almost feels meaningless, until the words are just sounds and the letters are just shapes. That's how I spent many of my days and nights in my cell. Breaking through all the stray thoughts and bypassing all the frivolous interpretations of the word, simply living inside the true meaning of it, reaching understanding through feeling rather than language. For a moment, I was that little bottle.
We're going to take a break right here. I think that that's like a perfect spot to stop and then pick up the next episode for when the highlights can clip and I can get that all set up. I got to get up and pee really fast. So don't go anywhere. I'm going to step up. I'm going to pee and then I'll be right back. And we're going to head into the Misericorde for the first time. So don't go anywhere. I'll see you in just a minute. Thanks, folks.